But it is my wonderful privilege and honor to welcome Tina Pippin here this morning. Dr. Tina Pippin, although I knew her as Professor Pippin when I was at Agnes Scott College back in the 1990s. Tina was one of the professors in the Bible and Religion department and quickly became just an amazing professor. As I told a group last night, she opened doors that I didn't even know they existed and that they needed to be opened into a world of study and theology and joy. So I still carry with me so many of the things that she taught. I took a class on Apocalypse with her, the books she recommended, and I will always be grateful for the way in which she saw something in me I did not even see myself. So I am grateful for your ministry in that way. She is a native of North Carolina from Grifton. She was a student at Parrott Academy. She went to Mars Hill College, Candler Seminary, and then where else have you been since then?
Louisville, at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary before the fall.
And she has written and taught. Pedagogy is one of her passions. She is also delivering the Rockermel Lecture this afternoon on Jesus in History and Culture. And so it is my great privilege to welcome Tina Pippin to teach us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. We have such amazing alumni from Agnes Scott, and this is so proud of her accomplishments. And to be here back down east, just about 25 minutes from where I grew up in Grifton. And if you didn't go to the Shad Festival this year and the Shad Toss, it's a competition. You can win a good prize like fishing tackle or something. You can always enter next year. It's the second weekend in April. And that is truly a sign of the apocalypse, which we're going to talk about today. And so the course that Anna was in, I'm not sure what it was called back then, it's now the Politics of Apocalypse. First time I taught it, Branch Davidians in Waco happened that semester. And so the next time I taught it, I think was Jim Jones in Jonestown. So I got kind of worried about teaching it. So I am not worried at all about teaching it in the fall of 2024 in an election year, right? So I will make room for questions, but I want to take you on a quick tour of the apocalypse. Now, I grew up Episcopalian. This book was sort of lopped off, left out of our biblical canon, the Bible, parts that we did read. And so since I have 3 degrees from Baptist institutions and have been much influenced by the Disciples of Christ with Camp Caroline summer camps and all of that, this is how I come to the book of Revelation. At Mars Hill, my very first year, I walked into a January term class that my doctoral professor, he later became my doctoral professor, Dr. Jim Blevins, he did it as a 7-act play with 7 scenes in each act. And his life goal was to perform it at the amphitheater, 10,000 people amphitheater, Roman built in Ephesus in southwestern Turkey. But the Turkish government would never give permission. So he did it locally. He used the Louisville Symphony. He saw hymns. There are hymns in the book, Holy, Holy, Holy. And we would sing them in Greek. And we'd sing them in modern Greek because that's the Greek he taught us and not the Erasmian Greek. So there's lots of ways to get into this text. If you think you know what it means and you are definitely sure about it, then I'm a little scared. And if you leave confused and having questions, then join the club. So what I have on this handout for you, and I'm going to use this in the fall too, so this was handy to come here, is an outline of the apocalypse because apocalypse comes from the Greek, and it means to reveal. And in the scholarly world, we call it the Apocalypse of John, but it's better known as the Book of Revelation. And it is a wild and crazy book. Apocalypse means to reveal, to unveil. It's like Pandora's box. It's to take the lid off and let the chaos reign. And there's a lot of chaos in this book. So scholars debate this endlessly. Most believe it was written at the end of the first century of the Common Era, CE, instead of AD, is a thing now. Not in the New Yorker magazine, which drives me crazy, but this is Emperor Domitian, who reigned from 81 to 96. It appears that his wife and other political officials had him murdered by the butler. I mean, there are all kinds of nice stories about Emperor Domitian, some of which are true and some of which aren't. However, this area in Asia Minor, or Turkey, or Western Anatolia, you can see the 7 churches, and these are the letters to the 7 churches that John, whoever John was, and we'll talk about that in a minute, wrote. These have all been excavated, and if you read the letters, you can see what archaeology has to say about some of the symbolism in the letters. So, who was John? John traditionally, of course, was seen as the writer, the beloved disciple in the Gospel of John, who wrote the Gospel of John, who wrote the letters of John, who wrote the book of Revelation. Well, if we're talking 95 CE, that would be fairly impossible, but there was a John. It was a common name. Historically, Bishop Irenaeus thought he had been boiled in oil, but he emerged from the oil unscathed, and there are all kinds of mythologies about John, that he was put on the Isle of Patmos off the coast of Ephesus, and he was imprisoned, and that's where he had a scribe, an amanuensis, probably a slave. If you're looking at some current, very current, just out literature, Candida Moss's God's Ghostwriters, I highly recommend it. And there is a play that was videoed with the guy who was in the Love Bug movies, that actor, and Dean Jones. And he plays John as a crotchety old prophet, preacher, and he is receiving visitors into his prison cell. And you can see, if you go to the Isle of Patmos, you can go to John's prison cell. Well, it's debated, was he in prison, was he in exile? But he wrote to the churches, the 7 churches, and they, the churches in the East, did not pick this apocalypse as their end text. They rather liked either the Apocalypse of Paul or the Apocalypse of Peter, which are 2nd century apocalypses, and have these very gruesome tours of hell, and with people being tortured all the way through. John is, whoever John was, probably an itinerant preacher, bishop perhaps. We really don't know. He got into trance state and had daydreams. Now, if you look at the book of Daniel, 7 through 12 is the apocalyptic section of Daniel, and there's a lot of borrowing from the book. So if John was writing this for a college class, he might get called to honor court for not citing his sources, but that they didn't think that way back then. So John gets into trance state. Of course, Daniel had night dreams that terrified him. And when John sees the Son of Man with the 2-edged sword coming out of his mouth and the hair of wool, which many scholars think was, an African North African Jesus image, because the Ancient of Days in Daniel also had hair of wool, that he fell down as though dead. And that is the appropriate response to the apocalypse, is to fall down as though dead. It is a terrifying book, and I recommend that you use all your senses: smell, hearing. If anyone has an ear, you just need one ear to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. It's loud, so you might want to back up a little from the book. And smelly, and you taste things. John tastes the scroll that initially tastes like honey and then turns bitter in his stomach. So there's touch, and you can feel the breath of the monsters on the back of your neck in this text. So apocalypse is all around, and we approach it from different, our own social locations and our own things that we know. Like this morning at the lovely hotel, I go out on the balcony, and the whole time I've been here, there have been flocks, plural, of seagulls, which are nice to see being landlocked in Atlanta. And what do I think of when I see flocks of birds? There's just a little bit under the skin of that Hitchcock movie, And I think this text works that way. If you really immerse yourself in it, and that's your choice. I'm not recommending it for Presbyterians, but many of my Baptist students have immersed themselves in this book and are awaiting the rapture. So there are many ways to interpret this book. So here's John. There's so many images, and I know these may be a little hard to see in the back, but here you have John having his vision. You see the woman clothed with the sun at the top. It is a fanciful, fantastic vision. And this is the Flemish apocalypse from 1400, lots of reds and blues and heads and judgment on the church of the time. So the apocalypse has always not stayed in the first century CE. It's been ripped out in some good ways and bad ways from its moorings in the first century, which we can't really know completely what those are. So it's fun to enter the debate. And this is John with the Son of Man. This is from the Dore Bible. And he's falling down as though dead because it's a horrifying image. So some of my work has centered upon looking at horror literature. Why is Stephen King so popular, right? Because we need that kind of catharsis. I don't read a lot of horror literature, I say, and then I do this book. But we need that catharsis, that fear of the end, right? Of that bad things are going to happen. Well, if you read the book, you come out the other end, and there's the New Jerusalem, the Tree of Life, and we'll talk about that. These are some other images that John takes the book from the angel. There are angels, and it's the only way you can get an apocalypse is through a mediator, and you need an angel mediator. There are warrior angels, the Archangel Michael, and so there's a holy war in this book that starts to gear up after the letters to the 7 churches. So the 7 churches' letters, you can, if you study them, and I think you're going to do a Bible study, a more in-depth Bible study on the book of Revelation later, you can see why the Eastern churches did not accept this book, because John is judging them and calling them to account. The church at Laodicea, for example, John says, "You were neither hot nor cold, and judgment is upon you," and God says, "I will spew you out of my mouth," which in Greek is really vomit violently. And archaeologists have found a Roman aqueduct in Laodicea that ran overground, and it had to go so far that by the time the water got to the city, it was sort of rancid, and they were noted for their lukewarm water. So that's John. So the rider on the white horse, you can see in this text there's what's called zoomorphic images, where you have horses and frogs and multiple beasts with 10 horns and eyes all around, and a lot of that imagery comes from Daniel. So if you look at the common scholarly stuff, I will still kind of go down some of that. There are colors in this book, vivid colors. There's white, and white can be victory, but it can also, or resurrection, but it can also mean death. So some Baptist friends of mine who are musicians have pointed out that in Isaiah, and this is Isaiah 1, I think, is a curse section, but it says, Lord, make them white as snow. And so there are a lot of Baptist hymns, cleanse me, make me white as snow. And in the Hebrew, that is a curse of leprosy on the enemy. So you don't want to be white as snow. White does not mean purity. It can mean death. And in a lot of African symbolism and other symbolisms around the world, it can mean death. So black can mean famine or distress. So you have the 4 horses that are different colors. Red can mean blood or power. Purple and red, the horror of Babylon in chapters 17 and 18, wears all this finery. And purple, the only people who wore purple and scarlet were the wealthy. And so there are many scholars in the last, I'd say, 15 years who have done what's called post-colonial readings of this text, where they look at this area of Western Anatolia or southwestern Turkey today and see their resistance to the Roman Empire that was 150 plus years before John wrote. It was an ongoing thing. They hated the Romans. And so you get some of that in this text. So there is, outside of Atlanta every year, in Stockbridge, Georgia, something called Tribulation Trail. And it's a fundraiser around Halloween and a fun date night for people. And I've taken students there several times, and you go at night, and it's based on what's called a premillennial view of the end of time, wherein there'll be if you've read the Left Behind series, Jerry Jenkins, it's and Tim LaHaye, and the various endless iterations of the Left Behind series. It's based on a belief in a kind of sudden rapture where all the true believers will be taken up to heaven, and cars will crash, and clothes will be left behind of those who are risen. I don't know why you have to rise naked, but anyway, there's that. And so, and if you've seen any of the Left Behind movies, anyway. So there's the rapture, and then there's a 7-year period of tribulation. And there is a remnant group in the Left Behind novels that is able to keep America, and it's a Christian nationalist narrative, ultimately, that America is the only nation chosen by God. And at the Battle of Armageddon, which happens at the end of the 7 years, and on the plain of Megiddo in Israel, it looks like in the Left Behind movie, sort of Russia-Chinese forces and the US and allies together. Then at the end of that battle, then Jesus will reappear and put Satan in the abyss, the big hole to hell, and have a 1,000-year reign on earth. And at the end of that, Satan will rise one more time, and then Jesus will, and the armies of God led by Archangel Michael will finally defeat Jesus. And meantime, those who've been raptured get a front row seat to the tribulation. I have many students who come in with premillennialist views. Well, and one was a member of this church that put on this play every year. The play is fascinating because you start and the Apostle John leads you to, tells you about his vision, and then you see people who are left behind. They can't find their husband, the baby in the carriage. It's very emotional. I mean, it really shows how emotional and how it hits on a trauma level. And then you get to choose. Well, you see the four horsemen. They're people on real horses riding by this fence yelling at you. And then you get to a place where you have to choose if you're going to believe in Jesus or if you're going to it's all about healthcare and food. Or do you want food? Do you want healthcare? Go this way with this army that's evil, right? Satan's army. And so the students, we split up. Well, of course, I had to go with get the mark of the beast. And you get like you go to a club, you get a stamp, 666. And so we can compare notes at the end. And then you see all kinds of suffering, and there's, the people in the church enact this. It's really quite well done.
Write a script? Did they do their own script?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then you get to the last judgment, and Jesus and the company are up on a stage, and they do it different, and they're all in white. And then they bring people in to be judged. And one year they brought a couple in, and the woman and the man had been church members all their lives. The woman had taught Sunday school for 50 years, all of this. And well, Jesus immediately took the man in and said, "You cannot come in. You are a member of the Sierra Club." and I thought, okay. Another time, a pastor, I felt so sympathetic. A man played a pastor who had taught, he was an evangelical pastor. He brought so many people to Christ. Jesus said, "But you didn't love me with your whole heart." And I wanted to step in there and say, wait a minute, Episcopal stuff. So, and at the end, they didn't do a hard sell. If you wanted to be witnessed to and prayed over, you could. So this happens every year. It's a big fundraiser. And if you have one, I don't know if you have one in Eastern North Carolina, but these are all over the place. So, the Four Horsemen, and my professor, Dr. James Blevins, he performed it in South Carolina at a football stadium. He had people perform it. I mean, this is very serious scholarship performance, not the Tribulation Trail. And he had real horses, but the horses didn't cooperate. It was a big mess. So the beast in art, I think one way, the best ways to approach this are art and film, material culture, going to tribulation trails, just kind of soaking in the different interpretations. And in this one, you can see, how the beasts are just wonderful. Many-headed beast and those who worship the beast. Archangel Michael with the great wings. So there's a lot of war in this, a lot of blood up to the horse's bridle. So if you really look at it, and some would say, well, that's just taking it too literally. It's all symbolic. But you really have to see the imagery because it pops off the page. And there's an artist who owns a gallery in Decatur, Sycamore Place Gallery, right near the depot on the railroad tracks. And I saw her in Kroger one day. And I'd known Sylvia for years. And I said, I want to do my daughter, who's now 25, Agnes Scott grad too, studio art and education.
Did she get a job?
Huh?
Did she get a job eventually?
Not yet. Well, she's kind of, she's in and out.
Studio art major.
Yes, exactly. And so she had those books where you're probably familiar, you open them, they're pop-up books. One of the best one, my favorite one is the Alice in Wonderland with the cards anyway. I asked her, I said, what if we had a pop-up apocalypse or a pop-up apocalypse? And she said, I might know somebody, let me think about it. And then a day later she came, let's do this. So we actually presented at the annual meeting of the Society of Biblical Literature. And she brought in some of her art. And anyway, we had a big art gallery extravaganza for a week with music, and we had several musicians. We had a giant Pegasus. You could paper mache, and you could make the wings go, flying horse thing. Most of it, I didn't know what it was about. It was art. We had these women weightlifters from Savannah. I'm not really sure. Dancers. It was, and some really wonderful apocalyptic art from different artists in town. I think one way to see it is to look at art and art history, to listen to music. If you dare to watch, The Handmaid's Tale, or there's so much out there. So many zombie shows. I don't want another zombie show. Yeah.
What about Good Omens?
Good Omens, yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the duality. Good Omens is a twist on the example of this duality of the book, good versus evil, kind of Star Trek, but Good Omens has kind of a twist because two angels are so wonderful together. So in the Episcopal Church, of course, we only have in our lectionary the heavenly throne scenes. And the throne has, God's on the throne, but the four living creatures are around the throne. They always fascinate me because they're kind of multiple zoomorphic, as it's called, animals. And then the 24 elders. And then John takes us to the New Jerusalem finally at the end. He had shown the New Jerusalem with the gates that are open, but the only ones who are allowed in are those who have been saved, chosen, and the 144,000 male warriors who have purified themselves by not going near women. And so you have kind of an all-male, I argue in my research, an all-male heaven. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. If you've seen John Martin, it's as big as that back. Oh, sorry, it's as big as that back wall. It's in London. It's amazing. So, is the New Jerusalem the place you want to be at the end? And I think it's also continues the horror. And I'm like very much in my own little camp in the professional society. Most see it, the Green Bible folks have really good material on this that I suggest work better for churches. Ellen Davis at Duke Divinity School, and then the folks in Australia, where they see Barbara Rossing, who's done a lot of work on rapture theology and also the ecology of the book of Revelation. What I see is total destruction. But it's the text itself as a literary text leaves the abyss is still out there. The woman clothed with the sun is still out in the desert. I mean, it's not a closed text at the end. So, as part of my research, I do readings on women and other things. There's some really good research out there now that has taken my stuff way, way beyond. But of course, this is what TV show? Did y'all watch Walking Dead? Filmed in Atlanta. And so if in the apocalypse you need a machete, that's the goal. So there are 4 major female characters that stand out. The first one is the Jezebel figure. And Jezebel, if I remember growing up in Grifton, and my Episcopal godmother telling her daughter who was about to go out on a date and was not dressed as she thought she should be and was wearing too much makeup, she called her a Jezebel. And of course, Jezebel has been used in Southern slave culture, the Mammy and the Jezebel dichotomy, and there's some rich history here. But Jezebel in 2 Kings was actually a very loyal wife to King Ahab, loyal to a fault. And the Women's Bible of 1898, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and company, when they did the Women's Bible, said, the commentary on Revelation said, well, she was the quintessential United Methodist pastor's wife. And so, early nascent feminism. But in the book of Revelation, in the letter to Thyatira, she is, we don't know if her name's Jezebel, she's just slurred. It's a slur from John to call her a Jezebel. And she is in bed with her followers. I mean, you know, the typical slander. Who knows? She could have been a woman prophet preaching a different message than John, a rival. We don't have any idea. However, we do know how the art works it out. And this is, again, the Flemish apocalypse. It's a close-up of part of that. And then this is an ancient statue of, or relief of Asherah, the Canaanite goddess, and from the Hebrew Bible era, and looking out a window. And in 2 Kings, when Ahab's general comes looking for Jezebel, she puts on finery and makeup and looks out the window. And classic scholars have noted that that's a picture of the goddess, that she was a priestess of the goddess, dressed as the goddess, and when she looks out the window. And then we know, this is Dore Bible again, her attendants, eunuch attendants, throw her out the window and she's trampled by horses and eaten by dogs.
Can you tell us what the Dore Bible is? I've heard of it, but I don't remember what it is.
Yes, it's a woodcut, print Bible from, anybody know the date, 16 or 1700? I think 1600s. So, and a close-up of what's left. And then there's a novel by Tom Robbins, Skinny Legs and All. A woman in the main character gets the imprint of her, all that's left of Jezebel, the head and the hands and the feet on her back. It's an interesting novel. The second character is the woman clothed with the sun, who is seen as Mary or Israel or the church, or anyway, she gives birth to a son, and who's seen as, in most interpretations, as the Messiah. As soon as she gives birth, the son is snatched from her by the heavenly beings and taken to heaven. And in this, she is given, the beast attacks her, and you can see the beast here spewing water on her to attack her and her followers. And she is given by God the wings of the great eagle, to fly away. And so she flies away into the desert, but here's William Blake has the best dragon beast. And also, some of the Trinity Broadcast Network has done a series called they're premillennialists, but they didn't put the rapture in. In their films, Megiddo, the Omega Code is the first one, and then Megiddo. And I asked them why I wrote them, and I said, well, why didn't you put the rapture in? And they said, well, it didn't really fit in the script. So they have a fantastic beast in Megiddo at the Battle of Armageddon. So they had a lot of money, and they used Hollywood FX to do that. So the woman clothed with the sun is seen as demure and sort of the, Queen Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Queen of Heaven, but also the bride of Christ, sort of, it gets kind of mushed. And reading, usually a book of hours in the medieval period. Also Our Lady of Guadalupe from Mexico, borrowed from this apocalyptic imagery. It's the goddess Inanna of Babylon, ancient Babylon, with the sun and the moon and the stars, those symbols. Kind of a great creatrix, female creator of the universe, but also a goddess of beauty, a goddess of motherhood. And then, of course, the dragon trying to get to the woman and her son taken away. Well, it always bothered me that her son was snatched from her. Thinking of a scene in the first Color Purple movie. Another version of the woman giving birth, and then with the great eagle wings and the serpent, the dragon is the serpent, and hark back to the Garden of Eden, and think about dragons and, well, I'm thinking of Shrek here, which is a little different. Dragons and the soldiers who come and slay the dragons. It's an ancient myth that Revelation also has hold of in some ways. And this one, I think this is a medieval apocalypse. It shows the goddess Gaia, or Earth, swallowing, because the text says the earth swallows the dragon's flood. And this is Gaia, the goddess, swallowing the flood. And the woman flying away to the desert. And so I kind of like to think maybe those two women started a feminist community, a utopian community out in the desert, and then there was that one, in the New Jerusalem, but that's just for fun. Of course, the goddess Roma comes in, because then our next character is the Whore of Babylon. And Phrygia is in Turkey, one of the provinces. This is the goddess of fertility on a beast. So a woman riding a beast is an ancient symbol. And here, William Blake does it so well, wearing scarlet. And when John sees her in the text, he is amazed. And the angel says, don't be amazed. But you have to be amazed. I mean, you have to be amazed at this whole thing. Folk art kind of does some things with showing the woman as a beast, with the beast head sort of, combo here. There are others that show her as demure. And in this one with the beast with all the horns. And then here we have one with the scarlet beast, right? And the platinum blonde hair on the seashore. Here she is again. She is drunk with the blood of the saints. And then I was having my tea one night, tension tamer tea, and noticed, oh, this is another woman on the beast. And all of a sudden, I was tense again. So you see how the images get borrowed. There she is, sitting with her cup of tea, not with the blood of the saints, usually in a chalice. the bride of Christ, which the Episcopal Church, it's been 25 years plus, I remember the bishop sending a letter out saying, don't refer to the church as the bride anymore because of, sexist connotations there. I was really surprised our bishop was saying that. But the church has often been seen as the bride of Christ. And here you have the Brussels tapestry where the bride and the lamb get married in the text. So they're taking it quite literally, and I think, I wouldn't. But above their heads is the whore who has been murdered and is burning forever and ever. And the whore of Babylon is one of the two women who speak in the text. The bride speaks at the end also. So I think there's another female character in the text, and that is the abyss. It's a hell, not to be too Freudian about it, but it's a hell mouth used in medieval theater. It has teeth, if you want to go the Freudian route on it. And there's some just wonderful medieval monsters. So it's the dualism of the text. You're either on the side of God or you're on and good, or you're on the side of evil. And the judgment is clear. And here, as I mentioned, the ancient apocalypses of Paul and Peter take it much, much further in terms of the layers of hell. And those are precursors to Dante. Except in Dante's Inferno, you can work your way out perhaps, but not here. You're there forever. So I can take some questions. I wanted to save about 10 minutes for questions. Yes?
I did my doctoral work on lectionaries.
Oh,
so
good.
I have a question about Revised Common Lectionary.
Oh.
Have you ever written to the Consortium on Common Texts and asked them why they didn't include the letters to the 7 churches so that all of the churches could read the...
I know. I don't know. That's a good thing to do. I don't know. I assume this book is kind of gauche for Episcopalians. It is really, it's in most mainstream churches, it's really violent. And there's been a lot written on the violence in the text and what to do with it, because it's over the top. And so it's hard to, you can just back away from it. It's easier. Like one example, Scream 2 was filmed at Agnes Scott. And I was really excited because I was doing a lot of work in horror theory, and Wes Craven, such a good director on horror. And they had the premiere, the trustees. It was a big deal because it was early film days there. Now everything's filmed there. Every Tyler Perry movie you want to see is filmed there. And at the premiere, the trustees just looked kind of not happy, that this horror film had been filmed on campus, because it was a little over the line for, good sensibilities, I guess. So I think this book goes way out there. Yes?
And I'm not to scoop this,
Mm-hmm.
So listening to you, I've always kind of taken hope in that the gate is always open and people
Yes.
can come and go, and that the sun shines, and that there's a sense of everybody is included, not just
Yes.
And the tree with all the fruit that's
Oh,
on both
yeah.
sides of the river. It sounds like I'm picking and choosing, and that I can't have the open gates without the 144.
Yeah. Well, and what is, yeah.
That's not really the faithful reading of the text.
Yeah.
To take that husband.
Well, and you asked about the tree last night, and I want to get to the tree because I think that's another female character in the text. Where have you seen the tree of life? Genesis. In Genesis, right? Yeah, and the tree of life is that too. And the tree of life is a symbol of the ancient goddess. So our Christmas trees, we used to have three Christmas trees in the dining hall in Evans, and I'd walk in and go, wow, the triple goddess, of North Africa and Arabia and other places. So not popular with my students. And so I think the tree of life, part of me wants to believe that goddess snuck back in.
So I can't, next time I preach this, I have to preach the whole thing. I can't just
You don't have.
interpret.
Well, you can go with the dominant theory. I mean, I did 2 panel papers in November at the annual Bible meeting and Society of Biblical Literature meeting, and I'm sort of a loner in my not wanting to say yes to this text. Early on, I was asked, well, don't you want to turn your no into a yes? By a scholar I really respected who did a lot of work on Paul. And I said, no, I want to say no. And also to respect the text in some way. Yeah, let it, yeah. Tree of life. Yeah. Yes.
And my question.
I love it.
If you had time, briefly, if you were writing Revelation today as John, how would you put it so it was relevant to our world today?
Yeah. Well, it would be really difficult to, I'm going to ask my students this question. Stacey asked it last night. It's a fantastic question. I'm going to ask my students in the fall. It would be very difficult to do that in a way that wasn't political right now because of the rise of Christian nationalism is really, and those who use this text as, they desire it to come true. And that means really World War III. And, I follow this stuff because of my classes, so it's really scary. And so, but I'm going to read a poem, very short poem, by someone who visited our campus many times way before I got there. And it's Robert Frost's Fire and Ice, which is my favorite apocalyptic poem. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. So, and since I do a lot of work in film, you can just go through your mind, oh yeah, that film where the world iced over or flooded or fired, all of that. So, yeah, I think to read this book, you have to read it alongside other things.
Do you ever
Yeah.
get nightmares from all this?
No,
Like Daniel?
no, because I think the catharsis part, that, you just get it out. You imagine the end of the world, why is Mad Max and Terminator and Walking Dead, why are those so popular? Because you can just get out your fears and then walk out of the theater or turn off the television. Now, but to be honest, as I said before, I can't watch Handmaid's Tale. The sequel, Margaret Atwood's sequel, is fantastic, by the way, but just because it's too happening in too many ways. Yeah.
Have you found a textbook that follows kind of your theology of the book that you would recommend to your students and to us?
Sort of, yes, sort of. And I just shared some with your other pastor. I'll show you. So this one is a good, when Anna was saying, preach it and, find hope in the end. This one, Revelation for Normal People. It just came out. There's a group, some of my friends are part of this group. It's a guide to the strangest and most dangerous book in the Bible. I think all the books in the Bible can be dangerous. I mean, we have an ethical responsibility, right, to study these things, and it's endless, the study. I keep thinking, I'll quit doing Apocalypse, but something always draws you back in with this book. But this is very accessible scholarship. I veer off the path with this book, but this is a very good book. And then another very new book by one of my favorite scholars. She's a theologian, teaches at Drew, Theological Seminary, Methodist Seminary in Madison, New Jersey. Catherine Keller, Facing Apocalypse, Climate, Democracy, and Other Chances. So what is apocalypse to you? What do you put at the top of your list? Think about that. For me, it's nuclear issues, because my ethics professor, the amazing Dr. Glenn Stassen, he had been a nuclear scientist at Duke, and when he did his degree, and then became a Christian social ethicist. He was part of Peace Now and other anti-nuclear groups, and so in the nuclear freeze movement and all of that. And now in Georgia we have, I think, a 4th nuclear reactor. Anyway, so nuclear for me. But then most recently, because of my research, is artificial intelligence and the singularity. It's like, why do I need one more thing on the apocalypse list, right? But apocalypse can also be, Alzheimer's, right? My dad had Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and I had to move him from Grifton to Atlanta. And so, that's a form of apocalypse, personal, and then it concentric circles right out from, your personal apocalypse of your personal health or divorce or, relationship issues to, the global. And then the cosmic with, heaven, hell, and all of that. Okay, yeah, other questions?
What do you say to people who are of a very conservative Christian group
Yeah.
who says, oh, well, the rapture's going to happen anytime now?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you one example. This is a positive example. A student who was a religion psychology major went to that church with Tribulation Trail, and then split because they had different speaking in tongues philosophies. Do you have to have a translator or not? That's a big thing in glossolalia circles, as it's called. And she did her senior thesis with me on glossolalia, and to keep it, academic, because it is a good study, it's a good topic. And she now is an assistant professor of psychology at Agnes Scott. She went on to get her thing. So some students are just shut down, I leave it open. I'm not going to change their views. And it's their community, right, that raised them for 18 years and loves them, and here's this crazy professor.
That's okay that I just ignore people who say that.
I can't ignore it, but...
And just say, that's interesting.
Yeah. But nowadays, different from when Anna was there, we're not a majority white institution anymore, which is fantastic, and a lot of diversity. And so recently 2 religious studies majors who are refugees from Myanmar, Burma, and the apocalypse that they experienced coming to America through refugee camps and violence is just, I only know a piece of their stories, right? So they're coming with that. We all come to the text with stuff, right? And it's a dialogue, and it's an endless dialogue. But you're in a good church to have those dialogues because it's open. It's not, oh, you have to believe it this way. And many of my students are afraid to read it for themselves because they've been told that usually the male authority figure has the answer to the text. And I think if you read the book of Revelation and you got your little box, okay, here's I understand it now, then it's just going to fall apart. And you're going to have more questions. And the questions are much more interesting than the answers, right? And apocalypse is going to come up this fall. So how to be prepared for that. George W. Bush, Ronald Wilson Reagan, which some scholars said was 666 because he had 6 letters in his 3 names, right? So you're gonna hear stuff, right? Fun stuff and not so fun stuff. So how to respond to that is important, and listening to people. Because those who are rapture bound, that's a real desire, you know, that this world vanish in a violent way. I don't get it, but I didn't grow up with that philosophy. So, okay, one more question maybe? And so, yeah, do not read this book late at night. And read it alongside a commentary, and I think this multi-week session that you're going to have is because to go into it deeper is important. So thank you for having me.